Welcome to the Wholesalers Playbook.
Now, every company is going to have their own unique sales and acquisitions process built around their model and their way of doing business. So the topic of sales and acquisitions is very broad. From the moment that a lead comes into your pipeline, that's where we're turning on the machine with the sales and the acquisitions, right? So we'll start this with lead received. Now this lead came in through your strategic marketing mix, whether it be a cold call, text blast, PPC, direct mail, whatever type of marketing you guys are initiating. Once a lead is received, we're starting the sales and the acquisitions process. Think of it like a warm handoff to your acquisitions manager. For example, our business, we have a bunch of virtual assistants who are cold calling and prospecting people throughout the day. Let's go ahead and pop over to me sharing my screen real quick so we can go over our process in-house with our cold call virtual assistant squad on the back end. So once we've pulled the data, we've uploaded it into the predictive dialer, which we've gone over that process in in-depth detail. Our cold callers are around the clock calling these different lists, looking for any motivated seller who's raising their hand saying, yes, I'm interested in selling. Whenever a seller answers and they're on board, they hear our marketing message, and they at least want to hear what we have to offer, our virtual assistants take them through that sales process. They follow the roadmap and the cold calling script, and they gather information about the property, about the individual's situation, in order to try to get as much information as possible to get a warm handoff to our acquisitions manager, who in turn can take the information and the data from the cold call and go to work, right? So there's a lot of different ways that a lead would be received. It could be a seller calling one of your direct mail pieces. Once it comes in, leads received, we move to acquisitions, right? Back to the screen, you can see here for the cold calling strategy and text strategy, as soon as the lead comes in, virtual assistant has the conversation, they gather the data and the information, and they drop it into Slack, right? Slack is the first stop where the acquisitions manager will receive it. He'll try to call this seller up front, and then one of our virtual assistants on the back end takes each lead and inputs it into the CRM every single day, right? So they take that lead, they go into intake, they upload that through a seller live answer form, right? That creates an opportunity and brings us to our lead bucket, right? And then we can put them through a sales process in an automated drip sequence. Anyways, that gives you a better understanding of what we're looking at, how we're sourcing when a lead comes in. Boom, that's where it turns on. The baton is handed off to the acquisitions manager, who will go through a sales sequence. So where do you go from receiving the lead, right? First thing you want to do, your acquisitions manager, is check out the lead and review the comps, right? Get to know that property. If you have a seller live on the phone, right? Say you answered a live call, live connection, whatever the case might be, you can straight tell the seller, hey, Mr. Seller, thank you so much for your interest. Bear with me 1 second while I pull up your property to look at what some of the houses are selling for in the area, right? People respect that. They know that you're a professional, that you're in process. So regardless if you're looking up the comps before you call the seller back or you're connected live, you might be the one initiating cold calls up front. Whatever the case is, just communicate, hey, bear with me 1 second. I'm going to go ahead and pull up my computer so I can see what similar houses to yours are selling for in the area, right? But you want to get an assessment of the area, right? You want to come up with and determine what your ARV is. ARV, now I'm sure most of you are familiar with it. ARV stands for after repair value. What is the market value? What is the value of this property after repairs are done, or if the property is in perfect shape, what is that ARV? You want to come up with a fair assessment of what that number is in order to determine, hey, what is the top of market that this house would sell for or potentially be worth if it was upgraded to current market standards, right? That's your ARV. First thing you want to do is look at your comps. We do have an in-depth how to run comps section in here. But pop over to Zillow, check out realtor.com. PropStream is a great resource as well. But always make sure that you're using a couple different resources to get a greater understanding of what those properties might be selling for. At the end of the day, all these companies are aggregating recently sold data from a number of different sources, and it's not always going to be 100% accurate. Even the MLS might be a little skewed, right? So just make sure that you're checking different resources in order to come up with this number. We'll have an in-depth training with what that looks like on the other side. But once you're going through this, you have a good understanding with where you're coming in, right? You want to take this seller. So let's say that you've researched the comps before the follow-up phone call. Here's our phone. Or even if you're talking with the seller on it while it's hot, right? As soon as you get the seller on the phone, your primary responsibility is to earn their trust. That is the single most important thing that you can do on this introductory phone call, right? Don't go in there smelling like commission breath, just thinking about the sale, but step into this conversation with a service first mentality. How can I best serve this seller, right? How can I listen to their unique situation in order to uncover, right? What's the root cause? What's the pain point? What is the distress in this situation? And how can I best serve them, right? That's your goal in this phone call, right? But that is done through rapport building. You want to earn their trust and you want to earn rapport because people like to do business with those that they like and that they trust. If you can't earn their trust, you're definitely not going to earn the sale, right? So after you got a fair understanding for the area, you can get the seller on the phone. You want to build rapport. What's a way to do this? Well, you could use, this came from my boy Eric Bryant, shout out, form. Talk about family, occupation, recreation, and motivation, right? So on this call, thinking about the form concept, learn about their family. Do they have children? What is the dynamic, right? Get to know that person, what their family structure or their occupation. What do they do for a living, right? What do they do for recreation? What do they do for fun? And what is the motivation for selling the house, right? You don't necessarily have to touch on every single one of those, but focus on the factor that seller is most focused on themselves, right? If you can get these people talking, people love to talk about themselves, right? And your goal is to guide that seller in the conversation. You think you want to earn trust? Earn trust by leading and encouraging that seller to lead the conversation. The more they talk about themselves, the better they feel. The better they feel, the more trust and rapport that can be built, as long as you, as the deal practitioner, are able to guide them along that process, right? So again, you're always starting with rapport. First conversation, in fact, the first 5 seconds that you get on that phone call is going to be that 5 seconds is the most important timeline in that entire call, right? Because that's going to determine how they feel about you. So how you approach that call and the confidence that comes out of your voice, the way that you approach it, they're going to feel that. Energy flows, right? So earn their rapport. Once the rapport is earned, you've gone through this process, you've pulled out motivation, then you can talk about the property, Okay, Mr. Seller, tell me about your house. Sounds like a great house, right? You want to give them compliments. Sounds like an amazing place. I bet it was awesome raising kids in that house, right? What's your reason for selling, right? Now again, in the acquisition section, we'll go in depth with what this looks like, but you can talk about the story behind the house, right? You can talk about motivation. What is their reason for selling? You can ask them what they want to sell it for. Hey, Mr. Seller, if we were to put together an offer today, did you have a price in mind? You always want to encourage the seller to give their price first, right? So price. What is their price? Rule in negotiations, in most cases, the first party to give their price usually loses, right? A lot of sellers understand this, but your goal, again, is to try to get them to at least throw a number out there. Well, I understand that you don't necessarily know what you want to sell it for, but you got to have some type of price in mind, right? So anyways, comps, research, rapport, story, motivation, property, and then that will lead you into your close, right? Or in many cases, because most deals take a long-term follow-up sequence, we'll call it the 80-20 rule. 80% of your deals are going to come from long-term follow-up. Only 20% of those are going to be the low-hanging fruit that come off of the first initial phone call or conversation where the seller's ready to go, they're raising their hand, where do I sign, right? So the importance with this is to focus on creating an efficient follow-up process so that you can focus on building rapport with that 80% over a process, right? We're talking 1 month, 2 months, 6 months, in some cases a whole year down the line, because real estate, again, is situational and seasonal. Motivation changes, right? The seller might be interested in selling, but they still have one daughter that needs to graduate high school before they want to downsize, right? Or the seller might be ill and sick, or they might be behind on payments, but that pain point hasn't sat far enough and they're not far enough behind to really be at a motivated stage, right? So understand that real estate is situational, and you want to make sure that you have a long-term follow-up process in place, right? But again, you've received the lead, you research the property, call the seller, build rapport, understand the storyline, get the motivation factor and the price, which will lead you to your close. And how you approach every single close is going to be unique in every circumstance that you step into, but you need to make sure that you're prepared and that you have a strategic approach with how you step in to that close. So that's the sales and acquisitions process explained, and we'll do an in-depth study on what these look like on some of the following modules.